I cheated on vacation. Now he's filed for divorce and ignored me. I kissed someone else on a rooftop in Santorini while my husband slept in our hotel room below. Everyone thinks I'm just another selfish wife who couldn't keep her hands to herself. They're missing the whole truth. The stakes are higher than anyone realizes. This isn't just about infidelity or broken trust. Elliot has filed for divorce papers, completely ignored every message I've sent, and painted me as the villain. What people don't understand is that my reputation, my marriage, and my entire sense of self are crumbling. And I did it for reasons that will make you question what you think you know about loyalty and love. I'm going to reveal the exact moment it happened and why, including the specific detail that's about to turn everything you think you know about me upside down. I promise you'll understand why this story needed to be told. Before Santorini, before the divorce papers, I was Sarah Chen, 34, working as a marketing director for a tech startup, married for 8 years to Elliot, who ran a small financial consulting firm. Our marriage wasn't perfect. We had the usual problems: work stress, different social circles, the gradual drift that happens when you stop really seeing each other. But we had a routine, a shared life, plans for the future. I'd been feeling invisible at home. Elliot would come home late, eat dinner while checking emails, ask about my day only when the silence got too loud. He wasn't cruel or neglectful, just distracted, like his mind was always somewhere else. At work, I was used to being noticed, appreciated, sought out for ideas and strategy. At home, I felt like a roommate. When our friends suggested a group trip to Greece to celebrate Maya's promotion, I was excited. "It'll be good for you too," Maya said, nudging Elliot's arm. "You need to remember why you like each other." The first day in Santorini was everything I'd imagined: whitewashed buildings against blue water, wineries tucked into cliffsides, conversations over sunset drinks. We were a group of 6: Elliot and me, Maya and her boyfriend Tom, our friends Lauren and Alex, and Tom's business partner Finn, who I'd never met before. Finn was charismatic, tall, with a laugh that made him seem genuinely happy to be wherever he was. He was a photographer, and immediately started documenting our trip with an eye for beauty that made everyone feel like the most interesting version of themselves. I noticed how differently he treated me compared to how Elliot did. Finn listened to my stories about work, asked follow-up questions, seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts about the wine we were tasting. When I mentioned my college photography minor, he was enthusiastic, suggesting we explore some of the island's hidden spots for shots. At the 7 mark, I found myself checking my reflection more than usual, wondering if Finn noticed the way I looked in the golden hour light. I felt a flutter of excitement when he asked if I wanted to skip the next planned activity to check out a different winery. I told myself it was just friendship, just enjoying being appreciated. At the 10 mark, when I suggested Elliot go with Tom to handle some business calls, I rationalized it as being considerate, giving him space to deal with his work obligations while I had fun. "You never take breaks," I told him. "Go, I'll meet you back at the hotel." At the 13 mark, Maya pulled me aside while Finn was taking photos of the sunset. "You okay?" she asked, studying my face. "You've been kind of intense today." "What do you mean?" "You just seem different, more attention-seeking or something." I laughed it off, but her words stuck. I was being attention-seeking, wasn't I? It felt good to be seen, to have someone look at me like I mattered. The first consequence came that evening. I returned to our hotel room close to midnight, and Elliot was still awake, looking at his phone. "Where were you?" he asked, not looking up. "Wine tasting ran late," I said, which was technically true, even if the late part was mostly because we'd gone to get dinner afterward. "You could have texted." "I didn't want to disturb you if you were working." He finally looked at me then, and there was something in his expression I couldn't read. "Sarah, we're on vacation. You don't need my permission to have fun. But you could let me know where you are." I wanted to explain about Finn, about how good it felt to have someone interested in my thoughts, but instead I just nodded. "You're right, I should have texted." We went to bed without another word, but I lay awake feeling a mix of guilt and excitement that was more confusing than either emotion alone. The next day, I made another questionable decision. At the beach, when Finn offered to apply sunscreen to my back, I said yes, even though Elliot was right there building sandcastles with Tom's kids, their kids, visiting for the weekend. I told myself it was just practical. He was helping out a friend, and I couldn't reach the spots between my shoulder blades anyway. At the 18 mark during lunch, I caught myself leaning toward Finn as he described his work photographing weddings in Italy. "It's beautiful work," I said, and I meant it, but the way I said it, the tone, made Maya's eyebrows rise slightly. At the 22 mark, when we all went cliff jumping at Red Beach, I was nervous, and when Finn asked if I wanted to go with him instead of the group, I said yes. We jumped together, and when we came up for air, he was laughing and I was too, and for a moment I felt completely alive and present and noticed. That evening at the rooftop bar, we found ourselves alone on the terrace after the others went inside. It was sunset, and the sky was painted in impossible colors. Finn was saying something about the light, and I was looking at him instead of the view, and then he was looking at me, and then we were kissing. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some grand romantic gesture. It was heat and adrenaline and the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in months. His hands were gentle on my face, and when we broke apart, I felt both terrified and exhilarated. Sarah, he said softly. I put my finger to his lips. Don't, please. We went back inside separately. I spent the rest of the evening watching Elliot laugh at Tom's stories, feeling like I was watching a stranger through a glass wall. At the 24 mark, as we walked back to our hotel, Finn caught up to me. About earlier, he started. It was a mistake, I said quickly. We were caught up in the moment. Is that what you think it was? I looked at him, and in his expression I saw something I hadn't expected: actual care. What else could it be? He shook his head slowly. You know what I think it was. But I also think you need to figure out what you want, Sarah. Because this, he gestured, between us isn't nothing. But if it doesn't feel like anything to you, then you're right. It was just a mistake. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Elliot, listening to his breathing, and thought about Finn's question, what did I want? The honest answer scared me more than I wanted to admit. The next few days I tried to pretend nothing had changed, but everything felt different. I was hyper-aware of my own actions, watching for signs that I'd become the person Maya had accused me of being. I was more attentive to Elliot, asking about his work, suggesting activities we could do together. But Finn was still there, still looking at me with those knowing eyes, and every interaction felt charged with the memory of that kiss. When he casually brushed his hand against mine while passing a glass of wine, my heart rate spiked. When he complimented my dress at dinner, I felt flush with pleasure. I was lying to myself and everyone else when I insisted I was just enjoying friendship. The truth was more complicated and more damning than I wanted to acknowledge. At the 28 mark, the situation spiraled in a way I hadn't anticipated. We were at a private wine tasting in a cave winery, and Elliot excused himself to take a work call. Finn and I were left with the sommelier, and when the man mentioned they had a special vintage from the 1980s, I found myself saying I'd love to try it, just the two of us. We tasted it alone, standing close in the dim cave, talking in whispers like we were sharing a secret. I told him about my college photography major, how I'd given it up for a practical career, how much I missed creating something beautiful with my hands. You don't have to give it up, he said quietly. You could start again. Not now, I said, and reached for his hand without thinking. Not while everything else is so complicated. He squeezed my fingers gently. What if I told you nothing has to stay complicated? My breath caught, and I knew in that moment that I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Not if he kept looking at me like that, not if he kept saying things that made me feel like I mattered. At the 32 mark, I made my worst decision yet. I went back to the cave winery with Finn the next afternoon, saying I wanted to buy some wine to take home. Elliot was at a business dinner with Tom, and I told him I'd be out shopping. We didn't buy wine. We spent the afternoon in bed at his hotel room. I tell myself it happened because I was lonely, because Elliot had checked out of our marriage months ago, because Finn was there and interested and made me feel beautiful. But the real reason, the one I couldn't admit to anyone, was simpler and more selfish. I wanted to feel wanted, and I was tired of being patient about it. The next morning I woke up in Finn's bed with a sense of clarity that was almost brutal. What I'd done wasn't just a mistake or a moment of weakness, it was a choice. A choice I'd made despite knowing it would hurt Elliot, despite knowing it would change everything between us, despite knowing I'd never be able to undo it. I showered and left before he woke up, lying to Elliot about where I'd been and feeling the lie sit heavy in my chest. At the 35 mark, I dropped the first breadcrumb about the ultimate secret. There's something about Finn you don't know. I almost told Maya at the airport as we were about to leave Santorini. But I swallowed the words, promising myself I'd explain everything once I got home, once I figured out what to do about my marriage. Back in Seattle, I threw myself into trying to be the wife I thought Elliot deserved. I planned romantic dinners, asked about his work, made an effort to be present. But every time he touched me, I thought about Finn's hands. Every time he said he loved me, I remembered the way Finn had looked at me in the cave, like I was someone worth knowing. I was living two lives, and both of them felt like lies. 2 weeks after we returned, Elliot asked for a divorce. We were having dinner at home, and I was telling him about my day, trying to be engaging and interested and normal, when he put down his fork and said, "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My heart stopped. "Okay, did you cheat on me?" The question came out so calmly, so directly, that for a moment I thought I'd misheard him. But the look on his face told me he hadn't misheard anything, and he was waiting for an answer that would determine our future. "Elliot, I need you to tell me the truth. Just once, just this one time, tell me the truth about what happened in Santorini." I could have lied. I could have said no, I could have asked what he was talking about, I could have played confused and hurt. Instead, I told him about the kiss. About how it happened, about how I was lonely and feeling invisible, about how Finn made me feel seen. I didn't tell him about the afternoon in the cave, about the way Finn's hands felt on my skin, about how good it felt to be wanted so completely. Some truths are too big to drop on someone all at once. Elliot listened without interrupting, his face growing more and more closed as I spoke. When I finished, he nodded slowly. How long? He asked. That was it, the kiss. That's all? You're lying to me again. I wanted to protest, but the certainty in his voice stopped me. How do you know? Because I've been married to you for 8 years, Sarah. I know when you're holding back. I know when you're protecting me from something by giving me a version of the truth that feels like mercy but is really cowardice. I started to cry, and I wasn't sure if it was because I was guilty or because he was right. I don't know how to tell you without destroying everything. Everything's already destroyed, he said quietly. The only question now is whether you're going to add insult to injury by continuing to lie to me about it. At the 42 mark came the major confrontation. Elliot stood up from the table, his movements controlled and deliberate, and said, I want you to move out. I'll stay here and handle the lease transfer. You can have a week to find somewhere else. Elliot, please, let's talk about this. There is nothing to talk about. You've already decided what our marriage is worth to you. I'm just making it official. I made a mistake. One mistake. Don't throw away 8 years because of one stupid moment. You didn't make one mistake. You made multiple choices, and every choice you made prioritized someone else over me. And then you came home and continued to lie to me about it. I don't know who you are anymore, Sarah, and frankly, I don't want to know. The next week was a blur of packing and finding a new apartment and trying to reach Elliot to see if there was any way to fix things. He ignored my calls and texts, only communicating through email about practical matters like bills and the lease. At the 48 mark, my support system began to crumble. Maya came to help me pack, and after an hour of awkward silences, she finally spoke. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, she said, echoing Elliot's words from the night before. Did you and Finn? I mean, I know about the kiss, obviously. I saw you two on the terrace. But was there more? I looked at her, this woman I'd been friends with for 12 years, and realized I was about to lose her too. Yes, I said quietly. Why? She asked, and her voice was so hurt, so confused, that I wished I could take the question back. I don't know how to explain it without sounding awful. I took a deep breath. I was tired of feeling invisible. I was tired of being married to someone who seemed to tolerate me instead of wanting me. Finn saw me, Maya. He really saw me, and for someone who hasn't felt seen in months, it was everything. Maya shook her head slowly. That's not an excuse, Sarah. That's a rationale. Elliot isn't perfect, but he didn't deserve to be betrayed because you felt bored in your marriage. Bored? You think this happened because I was bored? What other word do you want me to use? I started to cry again, and this time it felt more real, more honest. I don't know what word to use for feeling like you don't matter to the person who promised you would always matter. But you cheated, Sarah. You could have talked to Elliot about feeling invisible. You could have suggested therapy. You could have done 1,000 other things instead of what you did. I know that. I know it now. But in the moment, it felt like the only way to feel something real again. Maya packed the last of my things without speaking, and when she left, she hugged me, but it felt like a goodbye. At the 53 mark, someone got hurt by my continued deception. I was trying to get a message to Elliot through his sister, hoping she could help me understand if there was any chance of reconciliation. Instead of delivering my message, she called me. Sarah, I need you to understand something, she said. Elliot is heartbroken, not just about the affair, but about the fact that you came home and continued to lie to him about it. Do you know what it looks like from his perspective? No, what? He found out about it on his own from someone who saw you with Finn and told him. You didn't tell him, you let him find out from strangers. My blood ran cold. Who told him? That's not the point. The point is that when you finally did tell him, you still didn't tell him everything. You're still protecting yourself at his expense. I tried to explain, but the words felt thin and inadequate. I was protecting myself, wasn't I? Even now, even in the aftermath, I was still thinking about how much I could say without destroying myself completely. At the 58 mark, someone asked me a direct question that forced me to confront the truth. I was at my new apartment, sorting through boxes when Finn called. I heard about Elliot filing for divorce, he said without preamble. I sat down on a kitchen chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. I know. How are you holding up? How do you think I'm holding up? My life is in pieces, Finn. My marriage is over, my friends are taking sides, and I don't know who I am anymore. Has it occurred to you that maybe that's not entirely my fault? His question hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? I mean you were already checked out of your marriage before you met me. I didn't break you two up. I just gave you an excuse to admit what you were already thinking about. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you and Elliot had a real conversation? When was the last time you felt connected to him? When was the last time you thought about what you wanted your life to look like in 5 years, and included him in that vision? I didn't answer because I couldn't. Every question was like a spotlight illuminating parts of my marriage I'd been ignoring. You wanted to be with me, Sarah. I didn't force you into anything. You made that choice, and now you want to pretend like you had no choice at all. Stop, I said, and my voice broke. Just stop. Why? Because I'm telling you the truth? Because I'm not letting you blame me for your decisions? I hung up, but his words stayed with me, echoing in the empty apartment. At the 61 mark, I set up the biggest revelation with a confession that felt like pulling a splinter from my chest. I need to tell you something about my marriage. About why I did what I did, about the real reason everything fell apart. And once I do, you're going to understand why nothing I can say now will ever be enough. A week after Finn's call, I was scrolling through social media and saw a post that made my blood freeze. It was from someone we'd met in Santorini, a woman from another group at the winery. She'd posted photos from that weekend, and there was one of me and Finn at the Cave Winery, the afternoon I told Elliot I was shopping. But it wasn't just any photo. It was a photo of us leaving the cave together, my hand in his, both of us looking relaxed and intimate and clearly leaving from the same place. The timestamp matched the day I'd told Elliot I was buying wine. Someone had seen us. Someone had photographed us, and now that photo was public. I screenshotted it and stared at it until my eyes burned. I could see how it looked. We looked like a couple, like people leaving a romantic spot together. In the context of everything Elliot already knew, this photo would be the final piece of evidence confirming that I hadn't just kissed Finn once, that I hadn't just made one mistake. Elliot saw it within hours. I know because he texted me for the first time since he'd asked for the divorce. "This is what I was talking about," he wrote. "You told me about the kiss and I almost believed it was just one moment. Then I saw this. I can't even look at you anymore, Sarah. I can't even pretend to respect the person you turned out to be." I tried to call him, but he didn't answer. I tried again, and finally I just sat in my empty apartment and sobbed, understanding that I'd lost him not just because I'd cheated, but because I'd continued to lie about it even when I knew he was trying to figure out the truth. At the 67 mark, the full confession began. I realized I had to tell someone everything, the whole truth, not just the parts that made me look less terrible. I called my therapist, and in her office I finally said out loud what I'd been unable to admit to myself. "I need you to know why I really did it," I told her. "Not the reasons I gave to Elliot or Maya or anyone else. The real reason." She leaned forward slightly, her expression open and non-judgmental. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath. 6 months before Santorini, Elliot and I had a fight. Not just any fight, the kind of fight that changes how you see someone. I found out he'd been looking at photos of his ex-girlfriend on social media. Not just looking, he'd been saving them, screenshotting them, making comments about how she looked better now, and he'd always wondered what would have happened if they'd stayed together. My therapist's eyebrows rose slightly. He was actively pursuing these images, every few weeks for months. When I confronted him about it, he said it was just nostalgia, that it didn't mean anything, that I was being insecure for caring. But the thing is, Elliot, he started paying more attention to her profile than to mine. He started forgetting things I'd told him while he remembered every detail of her life. He started treating me like I was in the way of his memories. "What did you do with this information?" I tried to ignore it. I tried to pretend it didn't bother me because what was I supposed to say? "Stop looking at your ex's Instagram." I sounded petty and jealous, so I didn't say anything. I just started feeling like I wasn't enough, like I never had been enough, like I'd married someone who would always wonder what if. My voice started to shake, and then Finn came along and he made me feel like the person I was before Elliot started comparing me to someone else. He made me feel beautiful again, wanted again, like I mattered. It wasn't just about loneliness, Dr. Chen. It was about getting back a sense of myself that I'd lost in my own marriage. My therapist nodded slowly. "So you saw Finn as a way to reclaim your self-worth?" "More than that. I saw him as a way to feel what it was like to be someone's first choice again, not someone's backup, not someone's good enough, but someone's real, chosen, desired person." I started crying again, but this time the tears felt different, less about guilt and more about grief. And now I've lost both. I've lost Elliot, and I've lost any chance of a relationship with Finn, and I've lost the person I was before I made all these choices. I've lost everything. At the 72 mark, the most damning detail was revealed. "There's more," I told my therapist, and I could hear how my voice was breaking. After I came back from Santorini, after Elliot filed for divorce, I kept lying to him. Not just about what happened, but about why it happened. I made him think it was just about me being selfish and bored, because I was too ashamed to tell him the truth about the ex-girlfriend thing. My therapist's expression remained steady, but I could see she was processing this. "You didn't tell him about his behavior with the ex's social media?" "No." I was angry and hurt, but I also knew that revealing that would change the narrative from "Sarah cheated" to "Sarah cheated after months of Elliot disrespecting their relationship." And I was worried it would make me look like I was just making excuses, or that people would say I should have just talked to him about it instead of seeking validation elsewhere. "Instead, you took on full responsibility for the breakdown of your marriage?" I thought I was protecting him. I thought if I just admitted I was wrong and stopped trying to explain why, it would be less painful for everyone. I thought the noble thing was to be the villain in the story so he could be the victim. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. But I was protecting myself too. I didn't want to have to explain why I stayed in a marriage where I felt second best, because that would mean admitting I had low self-esteem or bad judgment or both. So when you told him about the cheating, you withheld information that might have provided context for your decision-making? Yes. And now, looking back, I realize I did the same thing to everyone else. My friends, even Finn, I gave them versions of the truth that made me look more sympathetic, more human, more understandable, but I never told them the whole story. I took a shaky breath. The worst part is that the whole story doesn't excuse what I did. Cheating was wrong, and lying about it afterward was wrong, and I should have found another way to address my marriage problems. But if people knew the whole truth, maybe they wouldn't think I was just some selfish person who couldn't resist temptation. Maybe they'd understand that I was someone who was already hurting, who was already questioning her worth, and who made a terrible choice in a moment of emotional vulnerability. At the 77 mark, the first major consequence of the revelation hit. You need to tell Elliot, my therapist said. Not just about the affair, but about the ex-girlfriend's social media situation. He deserves to know why you were so vulnerable to someone else's attention. I can't, I said immediately. I can't tell him that. It's been weeks since he filed for divorce. He won't want to hear from me, and if I contact him about this, it will just make him angrier. It might make him angrier in the short term, but it might also provide him with context that helps him understand why his own behavior contributed to the breakdown of your marriage. You're both carrying secrets, Sarah. You both need to put them on the table. I shook my head. No, absolutely not. I can't take that risk. Even if it means living with the knowledge that he thinks you're just a selfish person who cheated for no good reason. I started to cry again, and this time the tears felt like they were coming from somewhere deeper, more desperate. Yes, even then. Because I already know what happens when I try to explain complicated emotions to people. They either don't believe me or they make it about how I should have just talked to him or found another solution. I don't have it in me to have that conversation again. My therapist studied me for a long moment. So you're choosing to let him believe you're a worse person than you actually are, rather than risk him thinking you're making excuses? I'm choosing to let him hate me rather than risk him thinking I'm trying to manipulate him with half-truths. At the 80 mark, the final shoe dropped, the last hidden element was revealed. There's one more thing, I told my therapist, and my voice was barely a whisper. Finn and we didn't just have sex once. We met up 3 more times after Santorini before Elliot filed for divorce. My therapist's eyebrows rose and I could see her processing this new information. The week after we got back, he was in Seattle for work and he called me and I said yes to meeting him for drinks. And then we ended up back at his hotel. And then it happened again 2 days later, while you were still married to Elliot? Yes. While I was still married to him, while I was still pretending to work on our relationship, while I was still lying to him about where I was going and who I was with. My voice broke. I wasn't just someone who made one mistake on vacation. I was someone who actively, repeatedly chose to betray my marriage, and then I came home and continued to lie about it. I'm not the person I told myself I was. I'm not even the person I let other people believe I was. I put my head in my hands. And the worst part is, I knew exactly what I was doing. Every time I met Finn, I knew I was making a choice to prioritize my own feelings over Elliot's trust. I knew I was damaging our marriage beyond repair, and I did it anyway. I did it because it felt good to be with someone who wanted me completely, without reservations or comparisons or the weight of shared history that made everything feel complicated. After the second time, did you try to stop? Yes. The day before Elliot filed for divorce, I texted Finn and told him I couldn't do it anymore, that it wasn't fair to Elliot, that I was destroying my marriage. He texted back asking to meet one more time to talk, and I said no. And then the next day, Elliot asked for the divorce. My therapist was quiet for a long moment. You were in the process of ending the affair when your husband discovered the extent of your cheating? Yes. But it doesn't matter because I was already too late. I had already chosen Finn over Elliot enough times that our marriage was over. The timing doesn't change what I did. I wiped my eyes again. I keep thinking about what I would tell someone else in this situation. I'd tell them they were cruel and selfish and that they should have talked to their husband about their marriage problems before seeking validation elsewhere. And that's true about me too. But I also wish someone had told me I deserved to feel wanted in my marriage, that it wasn't my fault if my husband had emotionally checked out, that there were ways to address marriage problems other than affairs. But those things don't justify your choices. I know I'm not trying to justify them. I'm just trying to understand how I got here, how I became someone capable of doing something I never thought I'd do. Over the next few weeks, I watched my life disintegrate in slow motion. I lost friends who couldn't forgive what I'd done. I lost my sense of self as someone who made good choices. I lost the person I thought I was, someone who was loyal, honest, and capable of working through problems instead of running from them. The worst part was that the social media photo had gone viral in our friend group, an extended social circle. People I'd known for years were commenting on it, speculating about what it meant, sharing their own opinions about my marriage and my character. Some defended me, saying Elliot must have done something to drive me to it. Others condemned me completely, calling me a homewrecker and a liar. At the 85 mark came an unexpected consequence I hadn't anticipated. My boss called me into her office and closed the door. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something," she said, and her voice was careful. "There's been some discussion around the office about your personal life." My stomach dropped. "What kind of discussion?" "You know how social media can be. Someone in your extended network posted about your divorce, and apparently some people here have seen it and are asking questions. I need to know if this is going to affect your work performance or create issues in the office." I stared at her, realizing that my personal mistakes were starting to impact my professional life. "I don't understand. Some clients have mentioned seeing posts about your situation, and they're concerned about the optics of working with someone whose personal life is complicated. Client perception matters, Sarah. If people are questioning your judgment or your personal integrity, it could affect the company's reputation." I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. "Are you asking me to take a leave of absence?" "I'm asking if you need to take a leave of absence. I'm asking if you can maintain professional standards while dealing with this situation. And I'm asking whether this will be a distraction for the team." I realized that my personal choices were no longer just affecting my marriage. They were affecting my ability to make a living, to maintain professional relationships, to be trusted by clients and colleagues. At the 89 mark, a moment of genuine self-awareness broke through. I was sitting in my empty apartment, looking at the boxes I'd never finished unpacking, when I finally admitted the truth to myself. I didn't just lose my marriage because I cheated. I lost my marriage because I became someone I didn't like, someone who was willing to lie and deceive and prioritize her own needs over her partner's trust. And the thing is, I liked that version of myself better than I liked the version who felt invisible and second best in her own marriage. I realized that the narrative I was telling myself, that I was just someone who made one mistake because she was hurting, was just another lie. I was someone who made multiple deliberate choices to betray her husband and then lied about the extent of those choices. I was someone who was capable of selfishness and deception when it suited me, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. At the 92 mark, I was in the present moment, still dealing with the fallout. I had taken a leave of absence from work, was living in a studio apartment I'd never imagined I'd need, and had cut off most social media because I couldn't handle seeing people speculate about my life. I was in therapy twice a week, trying to figure out how to be someone I could respect again. Elliot had served the divorce papers through his attorney, and I was trying to figure out what to do about the division of assets and the life we'd built together. I was going through our shared bank statements and credit reports, realizing how entwined our finances had become, how much we'd built in 8 years, and how carelessly I'd thrown it all away. Finn had reached out a few times, but I'd stopped responding to his messages. I couldn't handle the reminder of how good it had felt to be wanted, because now it just made me feel empty. My friends were split between those who thought I was a victim of a failing marriage, and those who thought I was a selfish person who couldn't be trusted. Both perspectives felt incomplete and unhelpful. I was alone most of the time, which was both a relief and a punishment. I wanted the company of people who knew me and could help me figure out who I was now, but I also couldn't handle their judgments and their questions and their attempts to help me understand my own choices. I'm telling this story now because 3 months after the divorce papers were filed, Elliot finally responded to a text message I sent. It was brief, just "I know about the social media photos. I know there was more than you told me. I know you lied to me about why. I don't understand why you would choose to keep lying when everything is already over." And I realized that even now, even after everything, I was still protecting myself by not telling him the complete truth. I was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to manage how he saw me, still afraid that if he knew the full story, he would think even less of me than he already did. This is the truth I need to tell. I wasn't just someone who cheated on vacation. I was someone who cheated because I was already feeling unloved and unimportant in my marriage, who sought validation elsewhere because I was too afraid to have difficult conversations with my husband, and who continued to lie about both the affair and the reasons for it, because I was too ashamed to admit how selfish and dishonest I'd become. The worst part is that I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to become someone worthy of trust again. I don't know how to forgive myself for what I did, and I don't know how to move forward when I still feel like I'm living in the shadow of my own mistakes. I've learned that infidelity isn't just about sex or attraction or fleeting moments of weakness. It's about choices and patterns, and the ways we prioritize our own needs over our commitments. It's about the person we become when we think no one is watching, and the lies we tell ourselves to justify that person. Elliot thinks I'm just a selfish person who couldn't resist temptation. Some of my friends think I was a victim of a failing marriage. The truth is somewhere in between. I was someone who was already questioning her worth and chose to damage her marriage rather than address her problems directly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect understanding. I just needed to tell someone the complete truth, because I've been living with the weight of too many lies, and I'm finally ready to carry the full weight of what I've done. The judgment is yours now, because I can no longer judge myself against the person I thought I was. I have to face who I actually became, and I have to live with the knowledge that I chose to destroy something good because I was too afraid to ask for what I needed. That's the truth of it, in all its ugly complexity. I cheated on vacation, and I kept lying about it even when my husband tried to give me a chance to be honest, and I made a series of choices that destroyed my marriage and my friendships and my sense of self. And I did it all while convincing myself I was just a person who made one mistake in a moment of emotional vulnerability. The real mistake was thinking that makes it better. The real mistake was thinking that if people knew why, they'd forgive me. The real mistake was believing that I could control the narrative about who I was by controlling which truths I revealed. I learned that some truths are too big to keep hidden, and some actions are too damaging to excuse, no matter how much context you provide. I learned that the person who tells the story gets to frame it, but that doesn't change what actually happened. Now I'm living with the consequences of my choices, and I'm learning that healing isn't about getting forgiveness from others. It's about finding a way to live with yourself after you become someone you don't recognize. The story ends here, not because I figured out how to make things right, but because I finally ran out of ways to avoid admitting what I actually did and who I actually became. The judgment is yours, but the accountability has to be mine.